There is a very specific, very quiet negotiation that happens every single morning for like millions of people.
Oh, absolutely.
And if you were over 50, you probably know exactly the feeling. I mean, it's that moment right after you wake up, you swing your legs over the edge of the bed, and you just, well, you pause.
Right. You just sit there.
Yeah, you sit there on the mattress, sort of mapping out your first movements. You are literally negotiating with your own body before putting your weight onto the floor.
Trying to calculate, how the hips and the knees are going to respond today.
Exactly. And welcome to today's deep dive, by the way. Our mission today is exploring why our bodies feel so stiff as we age and how this remarkably simple ancient human movement can restore our confidence.
Because it really is a profound, almost invisible shift in how we move through the world. You're testing the waters.
Yeah.
You are asking your joints, are we doing this today? How much is this going to cost me?
Right, it's negotiation.
Yeah.
And we're pulling today from this really fascinating collection of texts focused on things like grounded vitality, the adaptive squat, and the architecture of ease.
And all of them are centered around this idea of reclaiming mobility after 50. Because that hesitation, it extends far beyond just the morning routine.
Oh, for sure.
You see it in the hesitation before someone stands up from a deep, soft couch, or the way a person will mentally strategize the least painful way to, pick up a drop set of keys from the floor.
The floor basically transforms from a place of play into, well, a place of danger.
Yes. What becomes immediately apparent when you look at the physiology of aging here is that this morning hesitation, it's not just a physical decline, it is an erosion of trust.
An erosion of trust. I like how you put that.
Yeah, I mean, confidence in movement fades way before physical strength actually does. We start avoiding certain positions because, well, getting low to the ground just feels inherently risky.
Right, standing back up feels uncertain.
Exactly. And it is not necessarily because the muscles are incapable of generating the force to do these things anymore. It's because that innate subconscious trust we used to have in our own physical structure has just quietly slipped away.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to figure out how we rebuild that fading confidence, we really have to look under the hood. We need to understand what the body is actually doing when it feels stiff.
Right, because we constantly misinterpret stiffness as a failure.
Yeah, we feel that tightness in the calves or the lower back, and we assume the machine is permanently broken.
But the underlying physiology reveals a completely different paradigm. Stiffness is not a failure, it is information.
Information. Okay, how so?
Well, as we age, there are natural physiological changes, right? And the most significant one is a decrease in joint lubrication.
Okay.
When we talk about joint lubrication, we're primarily talking about synovial fluid. This is fluid that exists inside the joint capsules to reduce friction between the cartilage.
Oh, so it's like the oil in a car engine keeping the pistons from grinding.
Exactly like oil. And just like oil, synovial fluid is highly dependent on movement and heat to function properly.
Makes sense.
So when you sit still for 8 hours at a desk or, lie in bed all night, that fluid literally thickens. It becomes highly viscous. It's almost like cold honey.
Cold honey, wow. That sounds incredibly sticky.
It is. So when you finally go to move, the fluid hasn't warmed up yet, so the friction inside the joint is way higher. And then on top of that, you have the mechanics of your fascia.
Right, the fascia, that's the connective tissue that wraps around all our muscles and bones and organs, right? Like a three-dimensional web holding everything in place.
Yes, exactly. And fascia is highly adaptable. When you spend long, uninterrupted hours sitting in chairs, your fascia actually adapts to support that 90-degree seated shape.
Wait, really? It changes shape?
Oh, yeah. It essentially shrink wraps around your shortened hip flexors and your shortened calf muscle.
Yikes. Shrink wrapped.
And furthermore, while you sleep, your body actually weaves new collagen fibers between tissues. It's a sort of fuzz that builds up overnight.
So when you stand up and try to stretch out, the tissues are physically resisting you.
Right. They have been molded into a chair shape and basically glued in place by a night of inactivity. And if you live in a colder climate, this entire process is amplified.
Because the cold reduces circulation.
Exactly. Low environmental temperatures reduce peripheral circulation, making those tissues even less pliable.
Okay, so the stiffness itself is just the physical reality of, cold synovial fluid and shrink-wrapped fascia.
Yes.
But if I'm understanding the sources correctly, the stiffness isn't actually the dangerous part. The real danger is how our brain reacts to that friction.
That's the crucial point. We feel that resistance, that discomfort, and the human brain immediately interprets it as a massive threat.
It panics.
It panics. Our nerve system is hardwired to protect us from catastrophic injury.
Hmm.
So when it senses a sudden limitation in a joint's range of motion, it assumes the joint is unstable.
So it tries to protect it.
Right. It immediately tenses all the surrounding musculature to create this biological splint around the area. It braces.
It braces. It sounds like having a highly anxious passenger in the car with you, constantly stomping on an imaginary brake pedal every time you hit a slight bump in the road.
That is a perfect analogy. The brain is trying to keep us safe by restricting our movement, but it's actually causing the very rigidity we are trying to avoid.
So it backfires.
Completely. The tragedy of that bracing response is that it creates a self-fulfilling cycle of fragility.
How so?
Well, when your knees or hips feel restricted, your body compensates by locking down the muscles. But that tension reduces your range of motion even further,
Oh, I see.
which means your brain perceives even less mobility, which makes you feel even more fragile. Stiffness leads to moving less, and moving less leads to more stiffness.
So over years, your world just physically shrinks.
Exactly.
Okay, so if bracing and locking down our muscles isn't providing true stability, if it's just making us rigid and fragile, what does true stability actually look like?
Well, true stability is responsive. It's adaptable and calm. It's the exact opposite of stiffness.
Responsive, meaning it can handle the unexpected.
Right. True stability allows your body to adjust smoothly to uneven terrain or, a sudden shift in weight without that panic response.
Because when you brace, you're locked down.
You're locked down. If you encounter a bump in the road, say you step off a curb wrong, while your muscles are locked in a brace, that kinetic force has nowhere to go.
It can't be dispersed.
No, so a ligament tears or a bone breaks. But if you are truly stable, your body absorbs the impact because the muscles, joints, and fascia are conversing with each other.
Reacting in real time.
Exactly, to distribute the load across the whole system.
Okay, so if our nervous system is interpreting our stiff, chair-molded joints as dangerous terrain, how do we prove to our brain that we are actually safe?
We have to break the cycle.
Right, how do we break the cycle of bracing? Because the texts point to a surprisingly humble movement as the ultimate reset button.
They do. The resting squat.
The resting squat.
Yeah, it's a deep, grounded position where your hips lower toward the floor, your feet remain flat or gently supported, and your spine stays relatively long.
It's amazing how entirely natural this position is for a human being. I mean, if you watch a toddler play in the dirt, they instinctively drop into a perfect, deep resting squat to, like, look at a bug on the sidewalk.
They do. They don't think about it. They don't warm up for it.
No, they just hang out there comfortably for minutes at a time. And in many parts of the world, adults retain this ability their entire lives.
Oh, absolutely. They cook over fires in this position. They socialize. They work close to the ground, entirely pain-free.
But in modern society, we've kind of lost that.
In modern Western societies, chairs have completely replaced the floor. Our daily movement is largely limited to narrow, repetitive 90-degree angles.
We go from a bed to a car seat to an office chair to a dining chair and finally to a couch.
Exactly. Because of that constant 90-degree lifestyle, our hips permanently shorten. Our ankles lose their dorsiflexion, which is the ability to pull your toes up toward your shin.
Right.
And because of that, the deep squat starts to feel not just unfamiliar, but like physically impossible.
So why is the resting squat the ultimate antidote here? Like, if someone has tight hamstrings or stiff hips, why wouldn't they just do some isolated stretches against a wall or take up light jogging? Why does it have to be the squat?
That's a great question. Because the resting squat forces a systemic conversation between body parts that have stopped communicating.
A systemic conversation.
Yeah. When you stretch a hamstring against a wall, you're isolating a single muscle group. Your brain isn't learning how to integrate that flexibility into daily life.
Oh, okay.
But when you settle into a resting squat, your hips, your knees, your ankles, and your spine, they all have to negotiate with each other in harmony.
It requires massive neurological coordination. It forces the entire kinetic chain to participate.
Yes, and by engaging all those areas simultaneously in a functional way, it dramatically improves proprioception.
Proprioception, that's sensing where the body is in space, right?
Exactly. It's your body's ability to sense exactly where it is in three-dimensional space without having to rely on your eyesight.
Got it.
The resting squat teaches your feet how to actively distribute your body weight, and it teaches your nervous system how to manage subtle shifts in balance close to the ground.
Without hitting that panic button we talked about earlier.
Precisely.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, but also a bit scary.
Huh?
I'm going to play devil's advocate here on behalf of the listener.
Go for it.
If someone is 55, dealing with dry knees, tight calves, and a genuine rational fear of falling or getting stuck on the floor, isn't telling them to drop down into a deep, toddler-style resting squat basically a recipe for disaster?
It sounds like it, yeah.
I mean, the mechanics make sense, but why would anyone trust their body to attempt that? It sounds like a blown meniscus waiting to happen.
The fear of getting stuck down there or feeling a sharp pain is entirely valid. But relearning the resting squat is not about athletic extremes.
Okay.
It is not about forcing your stiff body into a pristine, Instagram-worthy yoga pose on day one. It is a gentle negotiation.
A gentle negotiation.
Yes, you are simply trying to send a new signal of safety to your nervous system.
But even with a gentle mindset, if the joints are physically restricted by decades of chair sitting, won't the knees still scream at you?
Well,
Like, how does a person know the difference between the good pain of stretching tight fascia and the bad pain of, tearing a ligament?
that's a very important distinction. A sharp, localized, or shooting pain is a hard stop. That is a clear danger signal from your body.
Right, listen to that.
But a dull, broad ache, like the feeling of a muscle stretching or tissues resisting the movement, that is the sensation of adaptation.
That's the fascia slowly stretching out.
Exactly. The key is that you never push into the sharp pain. As the sources say, modification is wisdom, not weakness.
Modification is wisdom. I love that.
Every single body carries a unique history of past injuries, joint sensitivities, and footwear habits that have changed the shape of the foot.
So true.
So the goal is to adjust the movement so your specific body feels safe enough to explore the edges of its mobility.
Let's get into the actual mechanics of those modifications then.
Yeah. Right.
If keeping the feet flat is impossible because the calves and Achilles tendons are too tight, what's the workaround?
Right, because if you try to squat with tight ankles, you just end up falling backward.
Exactly.
So you elevate the heels, you slide a tightly folded towel, a sturdy yoga block, or a foam wedge under your heels.
Oh, just prop them up.
Yeah, by raising the heels just an inch or two, you completely bypass the restriction in the ankle joint.
Wow.
Suddenly, the mechanical stress on your knees is massively reduced, and you can drop your hips lower without shifting your center of gravity too far back.
The position becomes instantly more accessible.
Instantly.
And you don't have to balance out in the open either, right?
No, not at all. You can hold on to a heavy piece of furniture, a sturdy kitchen countertop, or the frame of a door.
Giving yourself a literal safety net.
Yes. By gripping something firmly anchored, the brain stops allocating energy to worrying about falling over.
Because it knows you're safe.
Right, and it can focus entirely on allowing the hips and knees to bend. Holding onto a door frame is particularly effective because it allows you to dictate exactly how much body weight your legs are bearing.
Oh, that makes sense. You can lean back, using your arms to support 50% of your weight, easing your knees into the bend millimeter by millimeter.
Exactly.
But there is still the question of duration. If someone is trying to rewrite decades of chair sitting, they might assume they need to endure this uncomfortable position for like 5 or 10 minutes straight to see any structural change in their joints.
No. Limiting the squat to just 20 to 30 seconds at first is entirely enough to stimulate adaptation in your tissues without overwhelming your joints.
Just 20 to 30 seconds.
Yeah. Doing 20 seconds of a heavily modified squat consistently every single day is far more effective than forcing a painful 5-minute hold once a week that leaves your knees too swollen to walk.
Wow.
And especially if you live somewhere cold, preparation is vital. You don't need a grueling warm-up routine, but walking around the house, marching in place, or doing some gentle hip circles gets the heart pumping.
It warms up the synovial fluid we discussed earlier.
Exactly. Physically changing it from cold honey to a smooth, lubricating oil before you ask your joints to bear weight in a deep bend.
It really reminds me of like coaxing a timid animal out from under the porch.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
You don't reach into the dark and yank the animal out by force. If you do, it's going to bite you or it's going to retreat further into the shadows.
Right.
You have to create a completely safe environment. You leave the food out, you step back, and you wait. It's an invitation, not a fitness challenge.
And the most direct way you communicate that invitation to your nervous system, the way you coax that animal out, is through your breath.
The breath.
Yes. When you lower yourself into whatever modified version of the squat works for you, holding onto that door frame with your heels propped up on a towel, your breathing pattern dictates everything that happens next.
Why is the breath the deciding factor there? Is it just about oxygenating the blood for the muscles?
It has to do with the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic nervous system. A slow, extended exhale is the biological switch that signals safety to your brain.
Interesting.
When you feel physical discomfort, the human instinct is to hold your breath or to take shallow, rapid breaths high up in your chest.
Which signals panic.
Exactly. When you breathe like that, your nervous system assumes you are preparing to fight or flee. It keeps the muscles in that protective, tightening grip.
But as you force a slow, deliberate exhale,
You are physically stimulating the vagus nerve, which overrides the panic response. Your heart rate slows. That physical tension starts to
the
soften.
muscles realize the threat isn't real.
Right, they release, and you stop trying to hold the pose and begin to settle into it.
Settle. Not feel the burn, not power through the pain. Settle.
Settle.
That requires a fundamental shift in how we think about physical maintenance, especially as we age.
It really does.
Okay.
But once your body feels safe settling into this position, it completely stops being a daunting, separate exercise routine.
It just integrates into your life.
Seamlessly. The most successful approach is turning the resting squat into a brief, unstructured daily ritual.
Not something you schedule into your calendar?
No, not something you need to put gym clothes on for. Just a small, ordinary moment in your day.
Like dropping down for 70 seconds while you're waiting for the kettle to boil in the kitchen?
Perfect.
Or taking a moment to decompress in the evening while you're watching television. You just take this brief pause to check in with your physical structure, completely without judgment.
Yes, just asking yourself, how do my knees feel today? How is my balance? Is my right ankle tighter than my left?
Just checking in.
And if we pull back and look at the bigger picture, the impact of this tiny daily ritual goes far beyond joint health.
How so?
By practicing this briefly but consistently, you systematically dismantle the psychological fear of getting low to the ground.
Which is huge.
It's massive. When you reduce the fear of the floor, you simultaneously improve your physical ability to rise back up, whether that's from a low chair, a deep couch, or, recovering from a fall.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Why should you grab a towel and a door frame and start squatting in your kitchen tomorrow morning?
That's a fair question.
It means moving well after 50 isn't about reclaiming your youth. It's not about sweating through a brutal boot camp workout to prove to the world that you still have it. It's about preserving your choices.
Preserving your choices, absolutely.
It is about keeping the menu of life wide open to you.
It is intimately tied to independence, dignity, and autonomy. It is the ability to bend down effortlessly to pick up a grandchild, or to plant a garden, or to recover smoothly if you lose your balance on an icy sidewalk without sheer panic.
Yeah.
It provides a quiet assurance from within that your physical structure can and will respond when you ask it to. In this context, physical stability becomes a literal form of freedom. And that confidence does not grow from pushing your body harder, it grows from showing up gently, again and again.
Let's bring this all together because the paradigm shift here is massive.
Yeah.
We started by redefining that morning stiffness on the edge of the bed. It is not a sign that your body is permanently broken.
No, it's not.
It's the physical reality of cold synovial fluid and tight fascia, layered with your nervous system's instinct to brace against discomfort. The stiffness is just a loss of trust.
It's just a loss of trust.
And the solution is not to force your way through the pain, but to gently reintroduce supported, highly modified resting squats into small pockets of your day.
Exactly.
By elevating your heels, holding on to sturdy supports, and using slow, deliberate exhales to quiet the nervous system, you slowly rebuild the lost conversation between your brain and your joints.
Reclaiming movement happens when respect replaces force. We have to stop treating our stiff bodies as broken machines that need to be aggressively pushed or punished into working.
Right.
But if the physical body responds so beautifully and adaptively to signals of safety rather than signals of sheer effort, it raises an incredibly important question about the rest of our lives.
Oh, what kind of question?
What other areas of our aging experience are we aggressively bracing against right now?
Wow. That is a massive question.
Where else are we white-knuckling our way through life transitions, misinterpreting natural, inevitable discomfort as a severe danger?
Yeah.
What else in life might suddenly become easier or more fluid if we just stopped forcing it and simply allowed ourselves to settle in, breathe, and find our footing?
That's incredible. The principles of true stability don't just apply to our knees and hips. They really do apply to everything.
They really do.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Take this knowledge, keep your spark alive, and maybe approach your next movements and that quiet negotiation on the edge of the bed tomorrow morning with a bit more curiosity and a whole lot more grace. See you next time.